I still remember the first time I played Call of Duty 2, and I didn't need photorealistic graphics or huge budgets to feel like I was inside a Spielberg movie. I have the same warm memories of some other games, and I'm sure that every generation has its own video games just like that. For some, it's San Andreas and Half-Life 2. Some people are nostalgic for the original Modern Warfare trilogy or the Mass Effect series. For a younger audience, it might be Witcher 3 and Uncharted 4. But why does the current generation have to deal with such crap? No, seriously, in 10 years, just as we are nostalgic for classic RPGs, will modern children be nostalgic for cringy skins and starters in Unreal Engine? Why has the gaming industry changed so much? Why don't games evoke the same warm emotions they used to? Why have all the big studios so radically changed their development vector? And most importantly, how did the best and greatest period in the gaming industry destroy the soul of games forever? Modern developers have become so lazy that gamers have started doing their jobs for them. And oddly enough, they do it better. That's how Wand came about, a desktop app that helps you customize single-player games comfortably. It doesn't read your mind or take control, it just gives you the tools to keep the game a game, not a chore. Wand supports over 3,500 games from Elden Ring to Starfield. Just press Alt and W to open the in-game overlay and start adjusting how you play. And everything works in the game. No need to go to your desktop and look for guides in your browser. Wand is able to auto-detect your game library and is ready to help right away. Modern developers don't really care if you enjoy playing. They artificially increase the difficulty and create an incredible amount of grind just so that you spend more time doing the same thing over and over again. Wand does the complete opposite. It removes the unnecessary so you can play games your way and enjoy yourself, whether it's decreasing difficulty or increasing difficulty. With that being said, download Wand for free using my link at wand.gg/radicalcap in the description and play your games your way. Everything that came out before 2010 might be as old as your grandpa's underwear, but most of those games were actually amazing. And to be a true masterpiece, they didn't need thousands of developers or RTX. The gaming industry was still developing, and studios understood that in order to capture attention, they needed to constantly evolve in terms of gameplay. Developers thought in terms of mechanics rather than user retention. Just remember the portal gun in Portal, which revolutionized the concept of space in games. Or the physics and destruction in Red Faction Guerrilla, where you could just demolish any structure rather than just shoot at textures, and all this was in 2009. Another important aspect was that publishers didn't require games to be 100 hours long, so it was just much easier for developers to make games dense and interesting. Almost every mission in San Andreas was a mini story, not a repetitive activity. Even those franchises that are now associated with endless grinding, outposts, and repetitive gameplay were quite interesting and always offered a new and unique gaming experience. Even those games that were linear had no unnecessary moments. Those were the days when games had structure, rhythm, and focus, and Call of Duty didn't need flashy CGI cutscenes to captivate us with its storyline. But despite the fact that these projects were objectively very good, and sometimes even masterpieces, there was one missing thing from these games. The thing that big publishers demanded: huge sales. Money changes people. Even me. When I buy a drink at Starbucks that's $2 more expensive than usual, I look at other people like they're shit. Because they came to Starbucks. The early 2010s, games finally become part of everyday life. Consoles and PCs are in every home, even in countries where revolutions happen every 5 years. Companies like EA, Ubisoft, and 2K realized that they could not just be millionaires, but billionaires, and that an entire empire could be built on video games. The market exploded, the audience grew tenfold, and the race for scale and spectacle began. Studios wanted every new release to look like a big event. Trailers now looked no worse than Hollywood blockbusters. Cutscenes became mandatory, gameplay became more diverse, and playtime usually became longer and longer. Just remember the difference between Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 3. In general, the evolution of humanity can be traced through this series. At first, we ran around Africa, and now we hunt and gather. There were only 4 years between these games, just like between Black Ops 6 and Cold War, where there was almost no difference. But when Far Cry 3 came out, it definitely felt like a gaming revolution, even with a classic downgrade from Ubisoft. This game became not just a cultural phenomenon, but also one of those games that planted a bomb under the asses of big publishers, which will explode in many years, destroying the game. But before laying the foundation for what would cause most games to deteriorate in the future, the third Far Cry took a special place in the hearts of all gamers. The game was released just as the industry was exploding with a variety of unique projects. Let's count together. Dishonored, Max Payne 3, the third Assassin's Creed, Sleeping Dogs, Borderlands, Black Ops, the reboot of Most Wanted, The Walking Dead, Diablo, Mass Effect. I'm already out of fingers here. But just a year before that, we got Portal 2, Battlefield, Skyrim, Deus Ex, Arkham City, Dead Space, Saints Row, Mortal Kombat. God damn, my peers are already wiping their tears, and I'm just glad you, for a moment, forgot about your ex. If you compare these games with any new project, you'll realize that we've been fed the same shit for 10 years straight in a row. And it was the third Far Cry that led to what we have today. I literally only need to show one single frame for 90% of viewers to be transported back to a time when they didn't have bladder problems.
Of insanity.
The cutscene and the actors' performances compel you to follow the plot closely and immerse yourself into the world. Far Cry sincerely wants to immerse the player in all-encompassing madness. And here comes the main joker of the gaming industry. If you had asked me 10 years ago about what I liked about Voss, I would have replied, he screams and swears cool. There were almost no such characters back then. But after playing Far Cry 3 as an adult, you begin to understand how deep this rabbit hole goes. Voss seems to exist in a metaverse, spouting phrases that don't make much sense at first, but over time, almost every single word he utters becomes prophetic for the gaming industry and Ubisoft.
Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again.
And this phrase will not just become a meme. From now on, Ubisoft will become a hostage of Voss, trying time and time again to recreate the image of a maniacal antagonist. His words about madness will prove prophetic, as the studio will repeat the same actions, hoping for a different result. Outposts, grinding, towers, all of this would become the basis of every subsequent game from Ubisoft and beyond. But at that time, these mechanics were just emerging and had not yet managed to annoy us as gamers. It was something new, and they did not prevent us from enjoying the game itself. Think of other games from Ubi at the time. Assassin's Creed 3 and Black Flag are my favorite parts of the series, and even the oversaturation of content and a lot of repetitive gameplay did not prevent these games from becoming true masterpieces. After all, in addition to this, these games had good stories, characters, good graphics, and interesting mechanics. And the repetitiveness itself was done so well that you still had fun boarding the 200th ship per game. But at that very moment, the big studios made a big mistake. They thought that it was this repetition of the same actions that players liked and kept them playing their games for hundreds of hours. When you jump too high, there are only two options: either fall to the ground or hit your head on the ceiling. But publishers chose a third option: to make shitty games. The PS4 and Xbox One generation was the peak in terms of gaming, with both masterpieces and real shit that doomed the future of gaming. The beginning of the decline was Assassin's Creed Origins, the game that officially destroyed the DNA of the series. For the first time in the series, each enemy had a level, and each weapon had its own DPS, and the once interesting adventure game turned into an MMORPG. NPCs now had levels, and enemies could not be killed unless you had farmed enough beforehand. Every single plot point came down to farming. To complete a mission, you had to do a dozen side quests that were completely unrelated to the main story. Origins introduced loot, XP, damage indicators, scales, epic helmets, all that shitty RPG economy that they had carefully tested in Far Cry 3. And I don't want to say the game itself is dog shit. The world looked incredible, which is something Ubisoft has always been good at. But the story, gameplay, and mechanics weren't just significantly worse than the previous installments. They didn't provide any positive gaming experience. All this game did was stupidly keep the gamer engaged. You bought this crap, so you have to force yourself to play the damn repetitive 50 hours to see the credits. And no matter how low the ratings were and how dissatisfied regular gamers were, Ubisoft and other studios saw that this model worked. Over the next few years, a bunch of similar games came out from major game studios, offering almost nothing new and repeating the same mechanics. If this flight doesn't get the fuck out of here, I'm gonna pull some shit on this bitch. He's on my escape key. Missed his bitch. And you know, it's very strange because it was during this period that perhaps the best games were released, considered masterpieces by both critics and players. The Witcher 3, RDR2, God of War, Uncharted 4, games that now seem like the last big bang of the old school. But in reality, these projects were just lucky. Because these games took 5 to 7 years to create, their development began when the industry was still normal, when developers really tried to outdo themselves and deliver well-finished projects. Perhaps if these releases had even come out a couple of years later, well, we would have seen completely different games. It was the last peak of the gaming industry, the last remnant of an era when it was still possible to make a game for the sake of the game itself. They were just lucky. After that, the decline began. The limits of technology were reached, budgets grew, but quality did not. Developers stopped experimenting because any failure now meant financial risks. Well, you know what happened next.
And that you will love playing these games.
What are you doing? Stop applying gas!
And the only question is, will we ever see the peak of video games again? That fucking fly again. Oh my gosh.